We rejoin the crew following their fun dance party. Sadly, it seems the fun wasn't quite enough to keep Pinion from breaking down and venturing around the camp insulting everyone. As part of the effort to make everyone happier, Doc began planning to add sinks to each of the bathrooms. This would mean that each member of the group could have hot running water in their homes, instead of the basins of cold water they were currently having to fetch from the wells. Dynapla was next to break down, deciding that an alcohol binge was the best method of dealing with his issues. What were his issues, I hear you ask? Why, the fact that he had consumed alcohol, of course. It turns out that Dynapla's religion didn't take kindly to the use of recreational drugs, and his guilt at having consumed some beer, and helping to mass produce it, caused him to break down in the most sensible way, by drinking a lot more of it. Following closely on the heels of Dynapla was Forenza, who, when later asked, claimed that the lack of recreation was his primary issue. However, we all know that the only form of recreation he would have accepted would have been smoke leaf. With Dynapla unresponsive, poor baby Haxton wasn't being fed, so Doc took it upon himself to feed the only baby food they had to Raven, their rescue pig. Just beginning her night shift in the fields, Pinion decided to insult Thancuuara as she passed by, which led to the two of them knocking lumps out of each other. If I didn't know better, I'd think Pinion was just looking for an excuse to get the night off work. There must have been something in the air as, at almost the exact same time, a boom bat and two muffalo went mad and decided to launch an attack on the base. Conscious that a lot of the base was still made of wood, Dynapla suggested engaging the boom bat away from the buildings so as to avoid a base-devouring inferno. The village is currently playing host to a group of visitors from a nearby friendly tribe, so the group took up positions near them in the hopes that they would help out. Together they made quick work of the boom bat and readied themselves to tackle the muffalo. I've said it before and I'll say it again, you don't want to mess with an angry muffalo. Unfortunately, one of the visitors never learned that and charged in on their own to try and stop the angry duo. It didn't go well. As the visitors engaged the two muffalo, the Distillery group provided supporting fire. From the safety of the other side of the riverbank, of course. Hoping to show that he could be more than just the guard of the distillery, Dynapla decided to flex his trading skills by selling the visitors the pemmican and the sword that he'd taken from the corpse of their fallen comrade. Dark, Dynapla. Impressive, but dark. Much to Doc's joy, the pub is starting to see some real use as he sits at the bar enjoying a beer, while Dynapla and Thancuuara enjoy what appears to be quite a spirited game of chess. Feeling a little concerned about sustaining the current size of the group, especially if there was a hard winter, Pinion suggested adding a small field of onions to the village. This would give them extra food to stockpile and just a little variety in their meals beyond potatoes and rice. While Doc was sitting at the bar enjoying a lovely dinner of baby food, Thancuuara attempted to convert him to a religion. The conversion attempt was very lackluster, but it did have an unexpected side effect. Doc's lovemaking seemed to match his attitude towards the study of medicine. Wildly unenthusiastic. The village is contacted by Jade, a 51-year-old geologist who begs them for safe harbour. She may have accidentally profaned her peace ritual between the betrayers and the family of Orion, and now both of them are out for her blood. Never one to turn away a person in need, Doc happily accepts, even knowing the troubles that will come from helping her. Jade arrives immediately, so while she takes a moment to get settled down in the village, let's get to know her a little better. Jade grew up as a slave on a medieval world, prior to it being dragged kicking and screaming onto the galactic stage when a space-age empire decided to make it their new outpost. With the empire came a lot of opportunities, and, having spent her slave years in a mine, Jade turned her talents to studying geology. Her experience in both of these gave her a good understanding of mining. Jade was, however, an Animusan. While emanating a soothing psychic pulse at all times and being able to run faster in cold weather, this also meant that she was genetically predisposed to being bad at farming, mining, and melee. She also suffered from a sensitivity to sunlight. Jade wasn't incapable of anything, so would be a wonderful addition to the village. Plus, given her aversion to sunlight, she could also maintain a nocturnal schedule alongside Pinion, giving the village a functioning night shift. Jade had arrived without clothes. However, given the abundance of furs that they'd obtained from hunting, it was an easy matter to fashion some into a crude tribal outfit for her to wear. With a bit of a redesign of each of the house's bathrooms, the group planned out the addition of some granite showers. Nothing quite says luxury and comfort like a hot shower in the morning. Adding to the luxury, Doc suggests that they improve his pet project, the pub, by throwing down some granite flooring. He envisions the pub as a place for the whole village to spend their free time, so it's quite easy to convince the others. Realising that Jade currently has nowhere to sleep, Doc plans out a new house for her in the east end of the village. Given their attempts to move away from wooden walls, this house will be their first that's built from stone. Things are starting to get a lot more productive around the village. With Jade and Pinion working the night shift, the day crew often have things ready for them to get started on projects immediately. For example, Pinion is spending her night cutting stone bricks, so that in the morning, construction can begin immediately on the new house. Doc suggests researching how the village can go about keeping a few hives of bees. He's heard mention from passing traders about a drink called mead, which is made from honey, and he's determined to not only try it, but to also make the best mead he can. Currently, most of the village's storage is located in the pub's freezer, meaning any jobs to the north or the west of the village require a lot of hauling materials. To remedy this, Jade suggests building a small warehouse in the centre of the village, where they can store building materials, making it easier to distribute them to jobs elsewhere in the village. A few days after her arrival, a group of raiders from the Betrayers and a group of raiders from the family of Orion both arrive at the village, looking to dish out justice to Jade for ruining their peace talks. With two large groups converging on them at once, this could be extremely dangerous. The village arms themselves and takes up a position near the distillery. Given Doc's desires to win over his enemies with unbeatable booze, he hasn't wanted to put any resources towards security measures. But, as they all huddle in an anxious mass behind the distillery, he's beginning to rethink that strategy. One thing no one had accounted for, however, was the reason that Jade was here. She'd ruined peace talks between these two factions, and, as such, upon seeing each other, both the raiding parties begin attacking, completely ignoring the distillery group altogether. With a large portion of the two forces keeping each other busy, only a few stragglers made their way towards the distillery group, who beat a tactical retreat, eager to let the two parties do as much damage to each other as possible before they had to get involved. 3 Yetikin from the family of Orion outlasted the others and made straight for the distillery group. They were able to take them down under a hail of bullets, but really starting to feel his Smokeleaf withdrawal, Fiorenza was moving solo and took a few hits from one of the raiders. Shocked at how lucky they'd been, the group moved to start rounding up the survivors. They would keep them locked up in the utility room, for the safety of the group, but they would tend to their wounds and, once they were healed, send them back to their people. It seems that the attack had been a growing moment for everyone, as, just then, Haxton began to be able to walk on her own. They would need to keep a watchful eye on her to ensure she didn't stray too far from the safety of the village, but Doc was proud to see his adopted daughter taking her first steps. Clearly impressed with what a great job Doc was doing of looking after Haxton, a nearby faction called the Robber Dragons got in touch with the village and asked them if they'd be able to look after their catatonic pet chihuahua for a few days. They offered some items as payment, but in his quest to become friends with everyone, Doc agreed to do it purely for the goodwill it would buy him with the faction. As if Thancuuara didn't have enough things to make her break down, the universe decided to smite her down with a dose of the flu as well. Eager not to lose someone to something so treatable, Doc insisted that she take bed rest until she was feeling better. Their small field of riverside cotton was soon ready to be harvested, and Doc put the cloth they made to immediate use, adding a pool table and a poker table to the pub. It was all coming together now, and he was really quite pleased with it. Fiorenza had been a helpful addition to the group, acting as one of their main haulers. However, his Smokeleaf dependence was nullifying a lot of this work. As well as making him move slower due to not satiating his dependence for a while, he also had regular breakdowns. An injured capybara falls from the sky in a transport pod, landing hard in the fields of the village. Who did it anger to deserve such a fate? Regardless, Doc suggests patching it up. He doesn't think they have much use for a capybara, but he doesn't want to leave her just bleeding out when he can help. The capybara thanks Doc for his kindness by almost immediately choosing not to join the colony. Ah well, he didn't do it for thanks. Eager to help Fiorenza have a better experience in the village, Doc agrees to have them plant a very small field of smoke leaf. He has no interest in selling smoke leaf, much preferring alcohol, but he wants to be able to have enough just to keep Fiorenza functioning so that he can enjoy his life. Clearly Doc's performance left a lot to be desired as Thancuuara and Pinion have their first date, taking a nice walk through nature. Doc was too preoccupied to care though. He was finally finishing the pool table in the pub and was extremely excited to have the place be fully functional. Angry that Thancuuara had seemingly overcome her flu, the universe decided that she deserved a nice big helping of the plague, to help keep her bedbound. Realising that Haxton would now need a full-sized bed, as she couldn't fit in her crib any longer, Doc suggested building a bed for her in the stonecutting room, which was also currently serving as Haxton's classroom. Doc was a big fan of efficient use of space, or at least that's what he told everyone when they asked why Haxton couldn't have a house of her own. Thancuuara was next in line for a breakdown, and honestly, given that she'd been struck down by 2 illnesses, one immediately after another, who could really blame her for needing to let off a little steam? Even if her method of letting off steam was to scream at a 3-year-old child. It was soon time to return the still catatonic Chihuahua to its owners. He had been a perfect guest, he'd just lay outside, occasionally being force-fed food. Now, however, it was time to load him back into the shuttle and blast him off at high speed back to his owners. Thancuuara was apparently still in a bit of a bad mood and is launching insults at Pinion, including calling her a terrorist? Doc offers to comfort Pinion and she gratefully accepts. Thancuuara, however, doesn't want to let them have their fun and bursts into the room to berate Pinion further. Pinion and Doc leave to avoid the situation, leaving Thancuuara alone in her sadness. Thancuuara catches up to Doc as he tries to relax with a beer, and, after hurling insults at him, the two end up in a fistfight. Thancuuara can't match Doc's strength, however, and she soon gets laid out on the floor of the pub. Poor Thancuuara, she's having a really rough time. Although Doc won the fight, he did still take a few hits, and the pain is making him consider some defences for the village. He'd rather avoid such pain in the future, and some solid defences seem like a good starting point. He doesn't want to give the group too much work to do at once, so begins by suggesting a stretch of wooden palisades from the hills to the north to the riverbank. His plans include a few embrasures, where the group can fire upon enemies, and a few doors, in case they need access to the north for any reason. Meanwhile, Dynapla engages with a bulk goods trader who stopped by the settlement. Eager to start reaping the benefits of selling their products, he unloads their copious amounts of beer and invests it in a woolly cow, which can provide them with wool and milk. He also purchases some additional steel. There is steel in the area, however none of the group are very skilled at mining, so extracting it is a slow and tedious process. As such, given that he has silver to spare, he chooses to simply buy some to stockpile it. In order to try and mend the relationship between himself and Thancuuara, Doc tries to treat her injuries. She still isn't fully over the flu, is struggling with the plague, and now has the injuries that Doc inflicted upon her to deal with as well, so really it's the least he could do. Nobody had quite expected Dynapla to return from his bartering with a cow. He'd gone a little bit rogue on that trade. But now that they had her, they decided it'd be best to set up a pen to keep her in. Doc began laying out plans for a small pen at the north of the village, next to the river. Seemingly sensing that Doc was finally thinking about defences, the universe decided to up the ante and send in the first lot of mechanoids. Thankfully, it was a stationary cluster, so Doc figured they could just ignore it and it would probably be fine. Right? As building the pen for the cow was taking longer than expected, Dynapla suggested just housing it in the distillery for now, until the pen was finished. Unfortunately, by the time he came to this decision, the cow had already wandered out of the area and was nowhere to be found. Given how much Dynapla had spent on it, and that it was his responsibility to look after it, Doc wasn't the best pleased. Thancuuara was soon back on her feet, and taking her turn at teaching Haxton a little about the world. Her choice of topic? Why, how to beat somebody to death, of course. The village had gotten by so far on a mixture of luck and wild healroot. However, wild healroot supplies were inconsistent, so Jade suggested that they throw down a small field to cultivate their own. God knows they need it given how many times Thancuuara was getting struck down by illness. Next up on the merry-go-round of mental breaks was Fiorenza, with the lack of Smokeleaf getting to him once more and causing him to go berserk. His first target? A small hedgehog. Determined to snap him out of it before he could get himself or someone else badly injured, Jade took it upon herself to engage him with her mace. The risks weren't low, but if she could bludgeon him, then he'd avoid the risk of infection, or bleeding out at least. Thankfully, she's able to put him on the ground without doing too much damage. With both Haxton and Fiorenza living in makeshift accommodation, the group finally successfully petitioned Doc to construct another house. Doc planned it in the northwest of the village, just next door to the distillery. Who would get it though would be decided later. After all the drama between them and Doc, Thancuuara and Pinion finally went on another date, agreeing to put all of that behind them. Jade suggested that they do something nice for Thancuuara, to make up for the difficult time she'd been having. After a brief discussion, the group decided to use some of their abundant cloth to create a large rug for Thancuuara's room. This might also go some way to satiating her greedy tendencies too, which made her long for an impressive bedroom. With the roof finally going on the new house, Doc had to make the decision of who to give it to, Fiorenza or Haxton. Fiorenza was having a difficult time without his Smokeleaf, so moving him out of the fermenting room and into his own house would likely help improve his mood. So naturally Doc gave the house to Haxton, the 4-year-old child. No one can say for sure why he made this decision, but it's possible that he has his favourites. Just as Doc is putting the finishing touches on the northern defensive wall, and contemplating how he's going to celebrate this wonderful achievement, he gets the news that Thancuuara has been struck down with fibrous mechanites. This means that a colony of small nanomachines have infected her muscles and begun to form long chains, causing intense pain. The only solution is to treat the pain until the body manages to destroy them all, which can take some time. Thancuuara really is just having the worst time possible. What a horrible experience. That evening, a bunch of the village got together in the pub, just to chat, drink, eat and play games. Even the newest addition, Jade, was there getting involved. It was really quite a lovely sight. At the start of the night shift, Jade snuck into Thancuuara's room to finish crafting a rug while she was out. Hopefully she liked her surprise gift. With the success of the northern defensive wall, Doc began to plan out another wall to the east. His end goal was to ensure that the majority of attackers would have to approach the village from the south, meaning that they could focus their defences there. The east wall would run from the river, south, to the stone formations there, and it would feature the same mixture of embrasures and doors as the northern section. It would encompass the graveyard and the patch of fertile soil that they were using to grow their healroot. Realising that the current plan would leave the river open, Doc decided to invest the extra materials needed to bridge across the river and build a wall across it. He didn't want anyone choosing to wade through the water and gaining easy access to the back of the village. The first harvest of grapes was finally ready from the vineyard, and Doc was incredibly excited to start producing wine. He immediately planned out a few extra fermenting barrels in the fermenting room in preparation for it. There was soon even more alcohol-related news, however, as the group had managed to construct 2 beehives on the east bank of the river. Once they planted some flowers nearby for the bees to live off, they could start producing honey, and, eventually, mead. With the addition of the grapes to the storeroom, Doc decided it was finally time to install the freezer unit, to ensure that none of the product in the distillery went off before they could ferment it. As the first time the wine is added to the barrels to ferment, Doc needs to decide on the quality level. The quality is purely determined by how long it is left in the barrels. Doc assigns one barrel to be legendary quality. This will take an exceedingly long time, but will be the best quality possible, and they'll only use this wine once they can celebrate bringing the whole world together in friendship. One cask will be of masterwork quality, an extra wonderful product that they can sell to those who can afford the steep price. The other casks, of which there is one at the moment but with another 3 planned, shall be excellent quality. Still an exceptionally high quality, and this will be the standard wine that the distillery sells. They would never think of selling anything less than an excellent product. That night, Jade finishes the section of the defensive wall that crosses the river, as well as finally fencing in the animal pen. Since their woolly cow wandered away a long time ago, Dynapla decides that they need to get a new animal to keep in the pen. Searching the surrounding area, he finds a stallion that he thinks would be perfect for the job. They may eventually have to travel to sell their booze elsewhere, so a horse would be a great help to speed up the journeys. With this in mind, he plans to attempt to tame the horse to make it join their cause. Pinion and Jade begin planting a small patch of bluebells near the beehives in the hopes of coaxing them into producing some honey. With the first harvest of smoke leaf being ready, Doc shows the group how to make them into joints for Fiorenza to smoke. The smoke leaf is purely medicinal though, so Fiorenza shall only be allowed one joint every second day, just enough to stave off his withdrawals. As the group are expanding their dirt path network to the south, a massive pack of snow hares enters the area, intent on feasting upon human flesh. Doc initially gathers everyone in the pub, hoping to outlast the hares. If they should fall asleep or succumb to starvation, then the group can easily dispatch them. Although hares are not overly powerful, in numbers as large as this, they could easily inflict enough small injuries on somebody to cause them to bleed out quickly. Doc soon realises that locking themselves away for potentially a few days is a poor option. Given how many mental breaks have occurred within the group, it would be very risky. One breakdown and a single member of the group could walk out of a door and into the deathly embrace of 100 tiny teeth. With Jade's assurances that she could happily bash 100 hares to death on her own, Doc suggests that they take up a position just outside the pub, where they can try and funnel the hares into her mace, through the tunnel in the meteor. Pinion's sap-like blood means that she bleeds slowly, so she gets sent to the front line too, along with Doc himself, who is actually quite adept in melee combat. Besides, he only has his taser, so he wouldn't be much use from the back lines anyway. Haxton is still only young, so would be quite susceptible to any injuries. Unfortunately for her, a couple of hares go straight for her. She attempts to run to the safety of Thancuuara's room, but accidentally lets a hare in too, effectively locking herself in with one of them. She tries her best to defeat the hare, trying to recall Thancuuara's teachings on how to beat things to death. She inflicts a few wounds, but receives many more. Thankfully, the group outside manage to finish up the last few hares of their own, and Jade rushes in to finish off the hare attacking Haxton. Everyone survived, with most suffering a number of small wounds. Only Haxton was in any real danger, and Doc made sure to tend to her first, before she could lose too much blood. Hoping to future-proof the village a little, and realising that their power supply was reaching dangerously low levels, Doc instructed the group to begin building a third watermill generator, further upstream. While nobody had been watching, Dynapla had finally managed to tame the stallion in the area, leading it to the pen to live. From there, Fiorenza, who had difficulty moving at any real speed due to his withdrawals, had chosen to ride the stallion and was using it to deliver materials around the village at top speeds. A couple of man-hunting elephants was the next challenge, and, given their size, the group were taking no chances, and all of them got involved, even the horse. Lining up on the riverbank, they danced back and forth from side to side, using the terrain to confuse and disorient the elephants, all while unloading their weapons on them. In the end, both elephants went down without any casualties to the Distillery group, another successful win. It would take a few more days before the hives produced any honey, but Doc was excited to try meat, so designated one of the fermenting barrels for the purpose ahead of time. Fiorenza worried that the others were starting to see him as lazy for using the horse, so while the horse slept, he decided to show off by dragging one of the elephant corpses to the dumping area all by himself. With the north and east sections of the defensive wall completed, only the west side remained. Doc began placing down orders to cut more wood and began to plan it out. With the proper preparations in place, the actual construction of the wall went by incredibly quickly, finally giving them a functioning defensive perimeter. Although the watermills generated a consistent amount of power 24/7, Doc thought it best to store some power in batteries to help deal with potential fluctuations in power usage. He ordered the batteries to be constructed in the utility room, to keep them safe and out of the way. Given that the storage room of the distillery was starting to get a little packed, Doc also started planning an extension for it. He planned to ramp up production soon, so it was imperative that they have the storage space required for all the primary materials. A group of animal herders arrived at the village, looking to trade. Dynapla was quite excited to speak to them when he woke up in the morning, wondering what new and wonderful animals they might have for sale. Sadly, the traders fell victim to Doc's short-sighted behaviour. Remember that mechanoid cluster he'd chosen to ignore? The traders accidentally walked right into it, and it cost them a number of their people, with many more being injured. The surviving traders decided to cut their losses and ran, but Doc decided to do what he could, taking in and patching up their injured comrades that they had abandoned in their haste. With a cold snap setting in, everyone's houses suddenly became freezing. Realising that the village already had the infrastructure to heat water, Thancuuara suggested that they install radiators in everyone's houses to heat them. This would take less resources than making a small electric heater for every house. Finally managing to create some smoke leaf joints, Doc was ecstatic to finally be able to help Fiorenza to deal with his addiction, only to make a horrifying discovery. Despite his crippling need for smoke leaf, Fiorenza's religion wouldn't actually allow him to smoke it. This would leave him in a constant state of mental anguish, which Doc just couldn't allow. His solution? Convert the stone-cutting room turned school into a prison and lock up Fiorenza until Doc could use his very limited social skills to convince him to convert to the ways of the Doctor-inking doctrine. Although things could be tough out here, sometimes you had to kill a score of bunnies and sometimes you had to lock up your friends in prison, but every so often there were nights like this that made it all worth it. Enjoying a drink and some poker with your friends in a pub that you built together. And that's where we leave the group for this week. Thank you guys very much for watching, and if you've made it this far, I have a small opportunity for you. I'm really loving the addition of Fiorenza's horse to the group, so if you'd like to suggest a name for the horse in the comments, please do, and I shall consider choosing one to rename the horse to in the next episode. The story and characters in this episode really developed in a way that I was thoroughly enjoying, so I hope you guys did too. It will be time to start distributing booze soon though, I think. But yeah, thank you guys once again. I will see you next week for the next installment, but until then, I hope you all have a wonderful week.